Good day, and welcome to Bitmaster Bitcoin Weekly Wrap-Up, another one. My special guest today is Robert David. Just before we get to him, we're going to talk a little bit about the price. Even though Bitcoin was slammed by the Silk Road takedown, I think it went down to $85 US or something, it's popped right back up and has been strong. Right now, the Bitcoin price is between 150 and 160, depending on what you're looking at. So staying very strong. I like that. I'm happy about that. There's a lot of news, but it's very technical. So what I want to do is dive right into my special guest today. And I really appreciate, last time we tried to get him on, unfortunately he had to go down to Silicon Valley. He's a worldwide traveler. Once again, his name is Robert David, and he's the founder and CEO of mymoneycloud.com. We'll get him to explain what that is. He's also the founder of the Vancouver Bitcoin Meetup. Now, Robert helps people get together. He's a libertarian, I guess. Are you, because you call yourself a libertarian, or?
I would call myself a political atheist, if anything. So,
okay, well, there you
but
go.
I wholeheartedly support a lot of the values that libertarians espouse, especially.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So through that, his Bitcoin meetup is in Vancouver, but it's one of the top 10 largest Bitcoin meetups in the world, and he'll be planning to travel around the world to meet other people. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's really a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Well, let's get right into your mymoneycloud.com. Can you tell us about that? You know, how you started and.
Well, a background on it, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the background to all of it really starts with the meetup, first of all. And that I came to Bitcoin through a technology meetup in Vancouver several years ago. This was during the original Mt. Gox bubble, if you recall this, in 2011. And there was a lot of really interesting people, a lot of really smart people in Vancouver who were looking at this technology, and it seemed to be having a lot of success.
2011 was quite some time ago. It must have been hard to get it because it wasn't very well known then.
No, it wasn't, and this is essentially kind of the interest that intrigued me, or what drew me to it in a lot of ways, was the people in the space were such groundbreaking people, such leading edge minds that were working on it, and that is something that I'm always looking for in terms of business. As an entrepreneur, I'm looking for the next thing, not what somebody else has already done.
Yes.
So I was really exposed to the technology through this really small but innovative community of people in Vancouver, and after researching the technology, spending a lot of time making sure for myself that if this was something I was going to get involved in, that it was sound, that the technology was there and proven, that this was absolutely going to be something that very disruptive and really changed the world dramatically. So subsequent to that, I knew that I had to become involved some way with this technology. So I founded the Bitcoin Meetup in Vancouver, which has had a lot of success.
Yeah, I've attended a couple of your meetups, and I got to say the people that I've met there are really high class, and the intelligence level is just way out. Everybody I talk to, and they understand. I mean, some people scrutinize the technology, but for good reason, right? They want to know what it's all about. But yeah, your meetups are fantastic.
We've had such great interest in the Bitcoin community in Vancouver. Maybe not by the mainstream technology community, but absolutely by people who are thinking or forward thinking. Open-minded people, looking for opportunity or looking for change in the world. A lot of people who are interested in activism with the technology and things like this. So the community and the technology really draws out maybe the best in people in a lot of ways.
Right, yeah.
And we also really welcome dissent. This is something I think that is super important. At our last event, which I saw you at, thank you for attending, we had a lot of people there asking challenging questions to some of the people who are presenting ideas at that event. And this is one of the best things about this technology, one of the best things about the space, is that it's very open to different ideas. In fact, Bitcoin itself is a very disruptive and different idea. Yeah. So if those of us in the space aren't willing to accept that same challenge, I mean, how can we expect other people to take Bitcoin seriously?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the meetup itself was kind of the foundation for me to try and explore opportunities in Vancouver, really understand the community, learn the technology better, and hopefully, at the end of the day, meet other people that I could work with. Because
that's a really good strategy. I like that. And just as we talked before, we got on camera here, you're thinking of traveling around to other meetups to meet people, specifically Japan too, you're thinking, right?
Absolutely. The technology is global in nature. There's no barrier to entry. Anybody in the world with internet access can use this technology. So the community is a global community already.
Right.
We have strong meetup communities all over the world, which is kind of the grassroots part of the Bitcoin community, and they're very strong in places like London and New York and San Francisco,
Right.
and even Israel and places in Eastern Europe. So the community itself is inherently global, and I knew that right away we'd have to start doing traveling to begin connecting with that.
Right. And you were down in Silicon Valley last
Yes.
week talking to people down there.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Now, let's just touch on that for a second. So it's global, but there's not a lot. So you say New York, San Francisco. What are some of the other places?
Well, the places where I think it's showing strength, surprisingly, is in Israel, actually.
Okay.
There's a large community there, very active community. One of the first, maybe non-major currency exchanges was in Israel. And also London was probably one of the core centers for the development of the technology early on. A lot of the first developers are European or out of London.
Is that right? I would have thought they would have been Americans.
Well, there are a lot of Americans, but absolutely Europe is strongly represented
Wow,
in the
okay.
Bitcoin community. And we found that out at the Bitcoin conference in 2012, which was London. That was the second major conference and really kind of a point of signaling transition between the underground and more esoteric view that people had of Bitcoin. It kind of legitimized it because
Right.
it was in London, it was in the heart of global finance,
Yeah.
and a lot of people there were in that industry and came there to learn a lot about what was going on. And then this year it kind of came back to the Western U.S.
Right.
Where we had the conference in Silicon Valley or San Jose.
Yeah, I think so.
In this spring.
And one of the speakers there, Roger Ver, was there, I believe, and he spoke there, and I saw his stuff, and he's also he's actually in Japan right now, as you know,
Yeah.
and I've met him, and I hope to see him again when I go back to Japan. But yeah, it's just gone so fast. I mean, within 2 years, it's grown exponentially.
Yes.
Now, there's not a lot of buzz in Japan right now, and nobody can really figure out why, other than maybe it takes a little bit of time to move over there. But let's move into your mymoneycloud.com business. So that, your meetups are going well,
Yeah.
and you found a lot of opportunity. I mean, Bitcoin just has opportunity everywhere. Every time you go somewhere, you see something. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's got a good idea on how to deal with money in a different way, right? So go into tell us about. So you started the Bitcoin meetups, and that led you to start up.
Sure. Yeah, we started meeting people
mymoneycloud.com.
with good ideas,
Right.
and I had some good ideas of my own that I thought were important in trying to express through business. That's one of the great things about Bitcoin is obviously it's very it engenders a lot of entrepreneurial attitude. People coming to the space already having an idea. So the meetup led to me meeting others who had similar ideas, and together with them I founded mymoneycloud.com,
Right.
which is the world's first online payment service for Bitcoin.
Okay.
And it's also the world's first coinless key management system.
You talked about that earlier, coinless. Now
Yeah.
everybody says Bitcoin, but you say it's not actually a coin.
Yeah,
Talk more about that.
It's not so much about individual coins, which are perhaps an easy way of thinking about the money.
Yeah, to understand.
Yeah,
it, right?
to bring it into the physical world, but it's
Right.
inherently a digital technology. It
Right,
only
yes.
exists online. So the idea of coins doesn't necessarily directly translate into the online technology, but it's a good
Okay.
way for people to understand it. I saw that there was a problem, however, with that, and that was the fact that we were storing these coins on servers and on devices that were able to be hacked or compromised in one way or another.
Yes, because that security is a big issue with Bitcoins,
This
right?
is the largest issue in the Bitcoin industry, is the security of money.
It's kind of like at the very beginning when people took their money to the, say, silver and gold and deposited it in the bank. The goldsmiths put it into a vault, and it needed to be protected, right? I mean, and so people are stealing Bitcoin because they have value.
Yes.
That's why,
Yeah.
right? So it's the same thing from a long time, just repeating itself, but only in a crypto.
Yeah, this is exactly right. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. It's kind of like we are storing these coins in vaults, and that creates incentive for people to either attack and try and compromise that system, or as we've seen in Bitcoin, a lot of times it's the people who build these vaults that end up just
taking the money for
Right.
themselves for whatever reason. It's a really easy way for them to avail
Get
themselves
rich,
and
yes.
get rich. So I saw that as kind of one of the primary problems in the Bitcoin space, being the risk and point of control and threat that this
Right.
wallet or coins created. So what I decided to do was then try and create a way for people to access the network itself without having to store their coins anywhere.
I see.
This
Okay.
has been done in a lot of ways in the technology, but it hasn't been implemented through software yet. The first way people started doing this was by using brain wallets, where they were not trusting people with either their software or their servers and saying, I would just trust myself to have a piece of information physically in my control, maybe
Right.
on a piece of paper,
Right.
that represents, my access into the network.
Because theoretically, because I want people to understand more, say the 33-digit code that you use that is the Bitcoin address, we call, right? You can actually write that on a piece of paper, not store it on any computer, and your Bitcoins are safe so
Yeah.
long as nobody has access to that
Yeah.
piece of paper. Is that correct?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
There's two pieces of information that are key to public-private key cryptography. There's
Yeah.
a public piece of information, which is kind of like your account number, and then there's a private piece of information that you use to actually sign transactions. This is what
Right.
people sometimes refer to as a coin.
Right.
They generally don't change hands because, as I say, it's not the money itself, it's just a way of authorizing payment.
Right.
And as we say, the first thing people did was try to mitigate the risk that storing that on a device caused. So they would store it on paper, or they
Right.
stored it in their mind. They
Right.
remembered it as they call it, a brain wallet.
Right.
So what we're doing is just taking that kind of approach and then making it really easy and really secure through a website. So it really essentially eliminates the need for us to store people's keys, and therefore eliminates that vector of attack on people's money.
So they own, for example, or only they can access that. It's
Yeah.
up in the cloud, so it's mymoneycloud.com. If anybody, we'll put this on the bottom of the screen,
Thank you.
mymoneycloud.com, and we're sitting here with the founder, Robert David. So I set up an account. How does it work? Guide me
Well,
through
it's-
if I was a user, what would
Yeah,
happen?
it's very, very simple actually in the fact that we've kind of eliminated some of the complexity in Bitcoin to a degree. You sign up as you would for any kind of social network,
Right.
like a Facebook or something like this, and when you sign up, you're also registering your public key. This public key is derived from the information you provide at sign up.
Right.
So therefore, we are leaving that information with the user
I
as
see.
a password.
Okay,
So
okay.
when you now use our service, you never have to provide that information and up until you want to actually authorize a transaction.
Right.
In which case, we now just simply prompt you for that information again.
Right.
And now we use that to sign
the
a transaction.
key, you say, the code that you have,
Exactly.
you type that in there and then you can do a transaction.
Right? So this is really important from a business model perspective as well, because if you think about what you're doing when you're storing people's keys, you're creating like a repository
Yes.
for people's keys, and this could be looked at in terms of creating a bank or a financial counterparty of some
Right,
sort.
yeah,
Now this is a very challenging thing to implement through a business model because there's a lot of risk.
Yeah.
Associated with that. There's the counterparty risk and there's a lot of security risk around that. So one of the primary reasons I wanted to take this approach was not only to reduce people's risk in using this technology, but also reduce the business risk that comes from creating what people to this point have done web wallets. When you're doing these kinds of things, you're incurring a lot of security and even financial and legal risk. So
Right.
our approach completely changes our business model, allows us to be a much more lean and agile company, which is really super important at the beginning.
That's great.
Right? So we have to be able to be flexible. The technology can change. It's a very dynamic industry, I'm sure, as you know. A lot
Yes.
of changes happening, and even the technology will evolve.
Yeah, well, and that's what we were talking about. I mean, you can get investors and bring all the money on the table that you want to the table, but if there's not technology driving it, and I really believe, over time, well, now, people that are in technology can facilitate, like yourself, creating products like this, so it becomes easier to use Bitcoin. I mean, that's really what we need.
This
right?
is I think one of the key points that has to be breached in bringing Bitcoin to the mass market. We need the technology community, even globally,
Right.
to
Okay.
embrace
That's
Bitcoin.
right.
We need software engineers, we need interface designers, we need people who can create the tools that people will use to access and really take advantage of this technology. Until we get there, it's still very challenging to bring anybody who's not technically savvy into
the
this space.
fold.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that we're trying to do with Bitmaster here too in Japan is to bring, like yourself, an awareness of Bitcoins to people, and then show them some technologies that they can use, like yours, and say, well, why don't you try this out and see how you like it, and then they can judge for themselves, because people usually do judge for themselves anyway.
The brilliant part about Bitcoin is that it is a free market, which is essentially what you're talking about. People are bringing to market ideas, and there's really no other arbitrator or judge of what the value of that offering is other than the market itself. So it's really a great way of finding value and doing so efficiently.
I totally agree with you. Now, you were saying that your platform is up and it's running now, so people can sign up and use it?
People cannot use it openly yet. We are in closed beta testing at the moment, but people can absolutely go to our website at mymoneycloud.com and they can sign up to request beta access to our platform.
I see. That's excellent. And now you're obviously in English-speaking community, so anybody who speaks English can do that. And you mentioned that you were going to go to Asia before. Tell us how you, why and what your reasoning behind that is.
Obviously, Bitcoin, as we said, is extremely global inherently by nature, and I think that if we look at the global economic picture, I think people, generally in economics and finance see Asia as a prime mover in the future of economics.
Yeah, both Japan and China, Taiwan, India could be big too, right? In South Asia, Southeast Asia.
Yeah, so for us as a business looking at a global market, obviously we want to take advantage of growing markets. And Asia has been growing for quite a while, and it continues to look like it will do so, and probably even more so than the Western world, which we kind of see now is perhaps treading water or stuck in a kind of continual crisis management mode, where we see problems in Europe, problems in the US that happened last week, where there's budget issues. So Asia seems to be still such a powerful driver of economic growth in the world, and I think will only continue to do so based on rising standards of living in their cultures, and also just the amount of people that are there. So,
what do you think specifically about Japan? I understand some, say for example, India helping people, some people don't even have a bank account, right? And Africa too, it's really been taking off. People, M-Pesa, and there's some other technologies there. What do you think specifically about Japan? I mean, they already have a pretty high standard of living. I mean, their GDP to debt ratio is just unbelievable, and obviously there's going to be some problems. I see Bitcoin not saving them, but being a really a good place to go to store your wealth, to move wealth around, that kind of stuff. Your thoughts?
I think, Japan could be really a great place for this technology. I think the fact that culture seems to embrace advanced technology so well, or digital technology so well, be able to understand it and integrate it into their society so well and improve upon it. I mean, that's really their modus operandi, is to improve upon amazing technology. So I think Bitcoin in Japan could be absolutely wildly successful. I think it might take some time to get there, perhaps because of cultural barriers that may exist or what have you. But I think people's openness to ideas about future technology and their really their understanding and ability to adapt to that change. Japanese culture, to me as an outsider, seems extremely resilient, extremely adaptable, and so I think that if there is problems as you allude to, I think if they see Bitcoin as an alternative or as an advantage or an improvement,
upon
what they're using right now, I think they would be very quick to adopt it. I don't think there would be too much stigma or a cultural barrier to that happening in the event that it did show itself to be, superior to the existing technology they have.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we look forward to seeing you in Japan, and when you are there, we'll have to do another interview. We
hope
should do
so.
something interesting. We should get Roger Ver, you, me, and some other people sitting around the camera. and
There's
talk
there's
about-
already strong Bitcoin community presence in Japan, as you know. I mean,
Well,
Mt.
of course, Mt.
Gox
Gox
is
is
the
look- is
largest
in
exchange,
Shibuya, yeah.
the most established exchange, the most successful exchange, and they're based in Japan and have been almost from the beginning, from the initial
Yeah.
takeover.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to think that the community there won't, grow and spread Bitcoin there as fast as anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity in not only the developing world or the developing nations in Asia, but the established and, as you say, higher standard living westernized cultures like Japan, I think could really prove to be a great market for this technology.
Well, it's basically, I think, in the future of money. Or part of it. If it's not Bitcoin, it's going to be some cryptocurrency. So I would be surprised if Japan didn't adapt it, say, within a year or so, simply because it adds so much value. It's easier to use. Just for example, say, lots of times Japanese kids travel to Canada, America, or around the world to study. For a year or so like that. And, they have to send money over to their kids and stuff like that. So that could easily be something that could facilitate just that. Or I think we talked about one time donations. Donations are, Japan is another leader in global donations and helping, they have their own problems, but they also help around the world too. So donations could be one part where people, it's probably somebody else I was talking to, but I mean, they're all starting to meld together into one big pot
Well,
here.
no, Japan is, as I said, I think well positioned, and the fact that I believe that once the technology is communicated effectively to that market, once people really understand it, I think there's still a barrier to understanding that exists pretty much everywhere in the world.
Right, yes, yes.
But that's the amazing thing that you're doing with Bitmasters, I think, is trying to share the technology and the understanding of it with the Japanese culture. So I really believe that once people, especially in Japan, begin to understand the technology, what it really is, how it really works, they'll see how far superior it is to national currencies.
Right.
At the end of the day, this technology, it won't take off unless it's better, and that's really why it has taken off.
That's a good point, yes. Unless it's better. If it was something worse, then it's
nobody
not,
would use it, right?
That's
So the thing that this technology does is just so dramatically reduce the risk to the erosion of your purchasing power, or to,
can't be inflated,
Yeah.
easy to low transaction
Yeah.
fees. It takes away from all of the, let's say, tyranny, if you will, that the banks and the governments we're under now,
This
right?
is huge, right? You could think of, if you have a bank and that bank is now in control of your money, they're a counterparty to your funds there. They can take those at any point in time.
Cyprus showed it.
Cyprus showed us explicitly that this is perhaps now the new paradigm for bailing out banks. It's no longer bailouts, they're bail-ins, in which case the depositors
take the money from the depositors.
are going to be at risk. So that's a huge risk to your
And Japanese
your
are
assets.
big savers. Last number I looked at, I thought the the average savings for household, not per person, for household, was about $80,000.
Right.
So that's a pretty big chunk of change.
Right.
And if you lost half of that,
Yeah.
it would put a lot of strain on.
If you lost the 40% like you did in Cyprus to your deposits.
And they said 10 at the very beginning, and it ended up being 40%,
well, yeah, it's a
right?
slippery slope when you
It
start
is,
talking
yeah.
about that. So I think what people will do when they begin to understand it is see how superior it is in the fact that it eliminates that risk.
Right.
Not only in terms of protecting the purchasing power through eliminating the risk of arbitrary inflation of the monetary base, but also by eliminating that point of attack, as we say in security terms, against your funds, and instead it distributes that risk across perhaps the most resilient technology we know of, which is a peer-to-peer network.
Right, yeah.
So now you're
decentralized.
This is the huge advantage that this technology offers, is that it decentralizes control over your money.
So in fact, when you have a wallet and you put your money in there, you're pretty well your own bank. You
Yeah.
can make transactions to people, you can
Yeah.
store it, you can save it, you can, and I mean, generally what banks do, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, the interesting thing is that the credits exist in the cloud pretty much entirely, and your wallet is a point of access to that. So you could really think of this as really a new kind of cloud technology, a decentralized cloud technology.
Right.
And yeah, absolutely, I really feel confident that, especially when advanced societies or like cultures like Japan, who are technically savvy, when they begin to understand how it is decentralized, they'll
could
just
take off
see
very-
they will see the glaring advantages
Right.
that kind of technology offers in comparison to the notes that are created by the Bank of Japan,
Right.
which they are creating so many at the moment, as we know.
well, they're going after inflation pretty.
They are, yeah, which
yeah.
is, they defined that as their goal, as
Yes.
creating inflation. So now all savers in Japan know that their funds are going to be devalued gradually.
over time, just like all inflation. Now, volatility is a big issue, and I just want to ask you about that, your thoughts on volatility, because people say, well, Bitcoins could go down to zero at any moment in time. I mean, they went to, 85 when there's a little crash, now they're at 140. I mean, what the hell is going to happen here?
Yeah.
Can you speak to volatility a little bit?
Sure, yeah, volatility is really a symptom of a lot of things that either, are happening in the markets or haven't happened yet. The one thing that we have is very kind of small markets still at this point. This is, not a large cap stock,
Right,
if
yeah,
you were to
it's
compare it to a stock.
1.5 billion,
1.5 billion
right
market
now.
cap,
Yeah,
you
it's
could
not too
say.
big, yeah.
So they're small markets, and small markets are generally more volatile. This is the nature of them, but there's also still not the full range of financial or market tools available to traders, to investors yet.
Right.
We really don't have full-fledged, Forex platforms that allow you to provide or to perform a lot of different trades in the markets. So we're missing a lot of inputs into markets. It's still a small market, and then it's highly, it's highly susceptible to media news because it's such a hot button topic.
Right,
As you
yeah.
say, the Silk Road event dropped the Bitcoin price down to $80 from 140 or so, and then in 48 hours it was right back there. So you had a significant change in the value of your Bitcoin over 48 hours. Now that is perhaps not something a lot of people would like to stomach with a significant portion of their cash.
No.
So it's somewhat of a barrier to the adoption of Bitcoin, but the thing that's happening, this was brought up in an event we held recently where there's a Canadian company that's actually building exchange software.
Right,
that
here in Vancouver.
Yes, here in
Yes.
Vancouver. So anybody can just create an exchange. The software exists. They don't have to develop it. They can just set up the financial part of it, and now they have a market. And what the idea is, and this is really, I think, where volatility will start to be addressed, is the idea is to create more liquidity in markets. And this is something that I think dramatically affects the price, is that there's not a lot of liquidity. So if you go into a market and you're a player perhaps, and you want to make a big move or a big trade, you're going to move markets
Yeah, absolutely, because it's so small, right? Even if
Yeah.
you did 100,000 a day or something like that, then it would probably be, it would change the market to a certain extent.
The markets are still very immature, and this leads to the volatility. But I would also say that there is, I think, a floor or a support for the technology itself, and in other words, I don't think it would go to zero.
No,
There are plenty of people who have a vested interest in the mining side of the industry,
yeah.
where there people are invested, have invested capital and time and resources in essentially processing transactions for the network. These people have a vested interest in continuing to operate these
Absolutely. I think there's
devices.
100,000 miners now. I mean, and the amount of people that are coming around Bitcoin, even daily, well, thanks to people like yourself and myself, who are bringing Bitcoin to other people. One of the things that I do for Bitcoins is I get people to download a wallet, QT or something like that, and then I give them
Yeah.
$1.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
something, and they, wow, that's amazing. So you kind of got to see it
Yeah.
to believe it, but
That's part of it,
that's
yeah.
a good way to get it in there. So I guess you're saying is that Bitcoin is not going to die anytime soon. I mean, it's volatile for obvious reasons that you just stated right now, but with so many people jumping on the bandwagon, it seems pretty stable to me, and it has been for quite some time, and I think all of us are working towards stability.
Yeah,
Right?
this is
essentially, you know, we need more people on board, and that helps grow the technology, and it supports the technology. One of the things, though, that is still a challenge that people should be aware of, that it's still early phase of the development of the technology.
Which is exciting, though.
It's exciting, and there's a lot of improvements to come as a consequence of that. So we're going to see just things get better from here.
Right.
Bitcoin is a dynamic and kind of organic technology. You know, it can evolve and change over time, and really it will only evolve towards what's better.
Right. No, that's a really
So-
good point. That's a really good point. Okay, I put everybody on the spot that I interviewed one time, and this is an impossible question to answer, but I'm gonna try it out on you. How long do you think it's going to take before Bitcoin becomes mainstream? And I'm not talking about overthrowing governments or anything like that. I'm talking about where you can, generally speaking, people will have it on their phone, and then they'll use it mostly.
Well, I think it's going to be some time, perhaps.
A year?
I would say
2 years?
I would say at least 2 years.
Okay.
Rick Falkving, who was leader of the Pirate Party or the originator of it, had a great talk that he did back in 2011, where he kind of broke down the disruption cycles of technology.
Okay,
In
okay.
which he was laying out, you know, a 10-year kind of cycle that
Okay,
happens for the
good.
adoption of a disruptive technology. So we're at 5 or 6 years of that.
Right.
So we could see perhaps in 2 or 3 years to start to really break out into the mainstream, and you know, perhaps in a couple of years after that be so widely used and available that you could pretty much walk into any store and expect to spend your Bitcoin there.
Pay your rent,
Yeah.
buy your groceries, do
Yeah.
all that, 2
Yeah.
or 3 years. My producer's telling me we're almost out of time, is that right? Anyway, okay, that's fantastic, David. I want to thank you so much for coming
Thank you
into the
very
studio today for your talk. We'll get this out to our audience as soon as possible. There you go. Another Bitmaster Bitcoin weekly wrap-up. We'll see you again next week. Until then, thanks, David.
Thank you very much.